This is day 2 of the December 90 7-day retreat at Springwater. I've jotted down quite a number of questions or things that have come up in meetings, and before reading that, I will say something about this. Over the past years, it has developed that talks are mostly based on questions people have asked in meetings. Sharing them and going deeply into a question or a concern that has been voiced. And in this way, participating, all of us participating in this process of talking and meeting and looking and clarifying. I do not have any or hardly any time in between meetings to put anything down. Sometimes I can't read what I did jot down, so I have to use memory, which is not very good. So I recreate questions from the jotted down notes from memory, often combining several questions that are similar, which always happens. That during a couple of blocks of meetings, several people ask very similar questions. If you don't recognize your question verbatim, please do not feel that you have not been understood. I am of necessity reformulating. If you wish your question to be brought the way you put it or be of help to me, write your question down, and I don't have to go through this work. I don't have much time for it. And just a word about asking questions. It is not necessary that you do that. Saying something like this and using questions so quickly triggers the reaction in someone who doesn't have a question or hasn't asked one, that one ought to do this like the others are doing it, that maybe one will be pleasing me if one brings a good question, or not pleasing me if one doesn't bring one. Can those concerns, those reactions be illumined, seen, but not acted on? Whatever comes up in a meeting is what comes up. Don't need to worry about not have anything to say. Sometimes we just sit quietly, listening to snowflakes hit the window pane. Can sorrow come to an end? The sorrow of not knowing what to do about it. The sorrow of not being aware most of the time. The sorrow of war, of killing, of living enclosed in self-centeredness and not even very much aware of it all. You talk about the deep-seated sense of and belief in being a separate individual being. But aren't we really separate, you and I? When I cut myself, you don't hurt and bleed, I do. When I lose something or get a present given to me, you don't have the feelings of sadness or pleasure. When I die, you don't die. When you die, I don't. So why do we say that we are not separate individuals? Can one listen to the furnace grinding away, to a fly buzzing, or to someone doing something stupid, without going from irritation to irritation? Are you, Toni, ever confused, afraid, in turmoil? I feel fear when I think of my mother and father dying, my companion dying, myself dying, afraid of not living anymore with the people and things I love. If all the sessions I have sat, all the prostrations I've done and chants I've chanted, the sittings I've participated in, don't help me to really face this, deal with the fact of death, then what is the use of all this? Do you teach any meditation practice? When I closed a door in a noisy way, someone showed me how to do it quietly, and I felt hurt and angry. Why does this happen? Is it that I feel that I have to be perfect, and it hurts to be shown my imperfections? I heard gunshots while walking peacefully through the field, and immediately felt anger and real separation from the people doing the hunting and shooting. I am getting older, and I'm going to die one day. People around me have died. When my defenses are low, maybe of an evening, there's tiredness. My life seems so utterly meaningless. I don't want to die knowing I have led a meaningless life. A question about questioning. At the beginning of retreat, I like things to quiet down by just attending to what's happening. And no question presents itself. I've found that if I do question, it becomes analytical. And yet, in not having a question, just sitting quietly, there is a conflict. Conflict, as we were going into it, of feeling one ought to have a question and doesn't have one, and therefore the conflict. Maybe we'll start with that, because it is about the beginning of a retreat, and also connect that with a question whether meditation practice is taught here by me. There isn't. Which doesn't mean I discourage people from doing what they want to do. If it's brought up, we look at it. Question, concentration practice. But there is no taught method how to quiet the mind or quiet thoughts or create a mind without thoughts, free from thoughts. Personally, I've been through such practices for many years, and also for a while taught them to people. And experience showed that none of that necessarily led to a deep understanding of the workings of the human mind and reactions in the body. Are you all right? That's okay. It's all right. I've lost the thread. I'm just quiet a little bit. Haven't found that concentrative practices, even though they lead to, maybe for people who are gifted in this way and practice very diligently, may lead to heightened concentration and energy focus to wherever the concentration is placed in the body. It leads to an ability to do successful battle with thoughts. Not always, not for everyone, but it can do that. But I haven't found it to illumine the mind as it is working from moment to moment in its needs to do something about itself through practices, techniques, methods, relying on a teacher, on a system, and so forth. The problem with concentrative practices, even they have these merits that we just listed. Heightening concentration, heightening focused energy. They need to do battle with what would interfere with the concentration. That is part of where the energy gathers in doing battle and fighting intrusive thoughts, feelings, sensations. Using the practice to push that away out of the mind, cut it off, suppress it, control it. And maybe the whole mind as it operates, chaotic as it may be, needs to be understood, felt, seen, heard, touched, without interference of deliberate practice or method. Now, you may not disagree with me, and we can talk about it in meetings. You may not agree with me. What has interested me is very often a mind that has not been trained in any particular meditative practice, in a training center, spiritual center, may be much quicker to catch on to just observing than one that is already conditioned to concentrate, to focus, to fight, to know what is good and what is bad. Thoughts are bad, concentration is good. Very hard for such a conditioned mind to look openly because the program is there. It is not impossible, though. So, the question that is brought all the time by people who are experienced in meditative practice or who are teachers of that themselves, comes up all the time. The question, don't beginners need it in order to deal with this overpowering, chaotic mind? Endless distractions, endless thoughts, feelings, sensations. I don't know what beginners need. And what is termed a beginner because a person comes freshly for the first time to retreat may not turn out to be what we think he or she is. A person may be feel great urgency to understand something about themselves, to find out about fear of dying or anger or the restlessness of living, difficulty in relationship, whatever. And therefore, because there is an interest and an urge to find out, there will be the energy to look and listen, at least for moments at a time. So all of our assumptions about what needs to happen in meditation can also be questioned. And can one begin with not knowing? Which is a very freeing thing, not to know how to proceed. Freeing of all the ideas one has of what one should be doing, what one should be attaining, what one should be. Can all of us be beginners in not knowing how to start, what to do, where to go, what to attain? Maybe even questioning if there is something to attain. It's another assumption, that in time, in the future, we will attain something if we do something now. And that thought, that idea or glowing imagination of what we will attain in the future is a source of energy to do something now, away from what is actually happening now. Do you see that? That the movement to do something in order to get someplace is a movement away from what is happening this moment of what? What is going on in this moment? If I don't know where I'm going, what I'm supposed to do, what I am or should be, the first thing is the wind howling, isn't it? Is one listening to that, or does one think this is a distraction? I must concentrate. But at this moment of the wind howling, there's just that. And it's not an intrusion, it's just what's happening. If the mind reacts, I don't like that, it's an irritation, it shouldn't happen, it mars my concentration. Then the wind is howling inside too, isn't it? Like the person said who felt the irritation about the furnace grinding away. He said, louder than that furnace is the furnace inside grinding away, wanting things to be other than what they are, opposing, objecting, fighting, getting annoyed, and all the chemical imbalance that comes from it. How the body reacts and responds to it, and not liking the body to respond that way. It's a chain reaction. So we're wondering if from moment to moment, whenever attention is there, awareness, I'm using this anonymously right now, can there be just listening to what is? Not as a practice to get someplace, but just because it's there. And what's there need not be ignored, or shunted, or shoved aside, or controlled, but just seen and heard and felt in a fresh way. Fresh meaning not knowing from the past what this is and therefore not giving attention, which is what happens and which is what one can discover in sitting. At the moment I know, oh, this is the wind, or this is my irritation, or this is my breathing, then we're with the words, with the memories, with the images, not with the real thing. But the question we're asking, what is the real thing, this instant, when I don't know? So someone mentioning, and it was in a group meeting, at the beginning of retreat, I usually don't have a question. A question is not a concern. What is happening is just quieting down with all that's going on. Knowing from the past, and that is memory, the person said, knowing from memory that if I think about things, I become analytical. That's what I do all day long, analytical thinking. And knowing from past experiences that leads nowhere with this work, analytical thinking. So maybe the intelligence of that past experience, seeing that, doesn't go with the analytical thought. Ends it as it comes up, or doesn't even start it. And then comes a certain conflicting feeling. Maybe I should be questioning. One has heard already a couple of talks with intensive mentioning of questioning. Question this, question that. And as is the case with us, we immediately wonder, am I doing the right thing when I'm not questioning? I ought to, but I'm not. And the conflict has been created. And with the conflict, one can look at that, feel it, comes a physical dis-ease that may also not be what one wants, so one is in conflict with the dis-ease that the conflict has triggered in the body. But no one says that you should have questions or should be questioning, even though it may sound this way. And that's why it's so good to keep clarifying this. That's why meetings are so vital in a retreat such as this, to clarify, clarify, clarify. Because it's so difficult to speak and listen accurately. Our language, our way of speaking runs on very automatic tracks. And it takes the intensity of energy and looking and listening quietly to not just speak automatically, but it happens at times. That it sounds as though you should be questioning. I don't mean to say that. I'm questioning that, whether we should do anything. So, is it possible not to be in conflict as one is sitting and listening without a verbalized, explicit question? Actually, the word questioning, the way I use it, does not just mean having an explicit verbalized question on which to work certainly doesn't mean to repeat it, which becomes a mechanical practice and loses the fresh spirit of inquiry. Questioning can simply mean listening without knowing. The moment we know, oh, this is my old backache, this is my unconcentrated way of being, these are all of my thoughts, and this is this, and this is that, this is my breath, and this is the wind. We move and reside in the world of the known, which is a closed field. A closed field of the known universe or world as thought has constructed it, individually and collectively. Words do come up, that is ingrained. It started when a little child, a little toddler was told what is what in the joy of child and parent when the first word comes out. Somebody just told me that the other day, his little girl, and she, for the first time, said the word ball. And he said, I swear there was a joy just at using that word. Not just because he was pleased. He was sure the little girl had a real joy using a word. There must be, we forgot about that, didn't we? I don't remember it, but there must be a real sense of power. Something. Being able to use words. Lots has been written about it. I haven't read those books, but of course there's also the shared communication. The parent expresses pleasure, satisfaction, love. The child has said something, a new word. Mother will say when the father comes home, or vice versa. Father will say when the mother comes home. So that's deeply programmed into us to name things and has a survival function. But here we're wondering whether one can examine this whole business of naming, find out for oneself, not just because Toni says so or someone else says so, that just sticking with a name hides and conceals what's really happening. What is named is not in the awareness, or has instantly dropped out as the word becomes important. And the word that comes up is not the only thing that comes up. A reaction comes up to the word. I like this window, I don't like it. It's marvelous or it is disturbing. This may not always be verbal. The body can express reactions without words, because memory is also programmed into, as I just recently read, every cell of this body. Is affected by thought and the ghost of memory. That's how the author put it. So to examine that, not just to take it as a bit of information and knowledge, but it's for us to see that words and reactions become important after something has been perceived, and the freshness, the originality of the perception is lost. It becomes unimportant. It's not given attention. The life of words continues. That's why we're wondering whether in sitting quietly there can be moments of listening, looking, feeling, sensing without knowing. That's what's happening anyways. The sensational perception is first, before the word attaches. And in sitting and listening for moments at a time without immediately knowing, or as a word comes up, to see the relationship between word and what is there, and not be drugged by it. To listen again, listen for a second time, afresh. You could also call that questioning, meaning nothing known or wordy is of this utter importance of our day that it assumes in our daily life. It's just seen for what it is, word and knowledge and reaction. Seen. And when it's seen, it loses its importance. And there is the more direct touch with breathing, howling wind, furnace grinding, fly buzzing, chair creaking, bodies moving. I'm using words because we're talking with each other. But the words do not obliterate the real thing. That is sitting, not knowing, which is also a subtle way of questioning, meaning not knowing, not taking for granted. Does that make some sense? Hearing a gunshot. What goes off inside? Something go off inside. Anger, the person said. Actually, two people talked about it. Anger, sadness, separation from those guys. That's thought, immediately knowing, interpreting, hooking into all of one's feelings. And off one goes. Can a gunshot be heard in all simplicity? Thinking about it, maybe a deer has been wounded, maybe a deer has been shot, maybe a hunter has been shot. It's all possible. That's how we live. And die. Can that be heard? An interpretation comes up, and yet not this immediate feeling of separation, me and my goodness versus them and their badness. We don't put it quite as simplistic as this, maybe more sophisticated. But there is this kind of separation when there's anger. And that inhibits understanding within oneself and including everyone else. If I had been trained, brought up the way this person who just shut off this gun was, grown up in the same family, same environment, same mystique, which is worldwide the male hunter, although people tell me now there are also female hunters. I may have fired that shot. I'm not trying to say inevitably the same conditions produce the same human being. but we don't know. Very likely that this would have happened. So can one approach things this way so the separation doesn't happen? Because out of this separation into the good ones and the bad ones enters more killing. Killing the killers. I'm not saying this was in the mind of the person who reported this. Please don't misunderstand. But out of feeling one's own superiority over others comes a common cause feeling, very easily incited to teach others a lesson or to eliminate them from the face of the earth. Which is extreme, but these extremes are happening and have happened in human history. So how can we live with each other different as we are, such different upbringing, such different impacts and influences, socially, economically, education-wise, race-wise, history-wise, family-wise, such differences? Or are there such deep gulfs between us at all, as much as we think? Maybe different colorings and shadings of the same mechanisms, different forms of the same processes. Antagonism is bred in any human being, regardless of race, color, creed, background, history, country, family. The urge to avenge suffered hurt of oneself or those whom one is identified with is worldwide, has gone throughout all history. So how are we really different? Fundamentally. Not in our particular looks or language or education. There may be differences there. In our hereditary makeup, there are differences. Albeit all of that comes from vast pools of information, hereditary and other information, in which we participate. So can we live with each other without separation? Is this asking too much? Is this being idealistic or pie in the skies? Or is it okay to ask such a question and then find out on the small day-to-day level whether we can live with each other even though you irritate me or offend me or insult me, criticize me or talk badly about me, and they're not developing a rift, an antagonism, a hatred, a getting allies, a camp of allies who feel like me and share my antagonism to you, and the gulf deepens and widens. Can we live with hurt or criticism or insult or whatever? Feel it, feel anger arising and be done with it. Let go of it. It's been felt, it's been experienced, it's been looked into, and it's finished. It doesn't need to be carried over. And no gulf needs to develop between you and me. And therefore I need no allies to align with against you, to give me support in my feelings of antagonism or hatred or whatever. That's good for all of us to look at, isn't it? Because if we look at that and work with that on our small day-to-day level, maybe something can change in us. This deep-seated feeling that I have to carry this grudge, I have to remember what he did. I'm not going to forget it. I don't have to. I don't need to, and it doesn't have to stick. So that we can meet again as friends the next day. With that, the question comes to mind. Do you also get confused, Toni? Do you get angry, afraid, this and that? Of course I do. This stream of consciousness which manifests in all of us manifests here too. There's no separateness from that. There's pain, there's fear, the anger can arise, although there's much less anger now than there used to be. Confusion can be there when there's a feeling it should be like this, it shouldn't be like that. We're all human beings, all dunked in this stream of consciousness with the same content for all of us, plus our own individual idiosyncratic content of what we personally have experienced and no one else may have experienced in just that particular form and intensity. But that is also true for all of us, having some idiosyncrasies, which I just read the other day means a special mixture. Idiosyncrasy, special mixture of the whole. That's why it is possible to understand each other, because the same ways function in all of us. But what is also operating, albeit not all the time, is a spacious emptiness which is intelligent and which can make transparent these movements of consciousness, these movements of the mind and anger or fear, or this retaliatory urge. When there's the operation of spacious, empty intelligence, operating out of emptiness, space, not encumbered by self-center. When that's operating, then what comes up in the mind can become transparent, visible, seeable, hearable, touchable. And with that, it loses its great importance, which it has if this intelligence is not operating. Then self-enclosure and feeling isolated or needing to lash out is all important, and that's all there is. But when it's seen freely, intelligently, I don't mean the intelligence of thought, the intelligence of whole aliveness, wholesome aliveness, then these movements of me, with their angers, their fears, their needs to retaliate or to acquire, they lose their importance. They're seen for what they are, conditioning. And so dangerous, so dark. Which does not mean seeing them once as seeing them for all times. This work is from moment to moment. It's not from now until all eternity. That's a thought, an idea. As is all time. listening openly, quietly right now to what's happening inside, outside, which is not really separate either. There's no time, no how long or how short, no forever. That's the movement of thought and worry and wanting. Which may operate at other times, but it's not operating right now. We will end here for today.